It's the Sod Pod. Brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. We're back. Season 4. There's been a couple of promotions and a couple of people demoted as well, lads. It's a bit like the League Hurling Championship this year. It's absolutely brilliant to be back. Change of format this year. Edward, what are we going at this year?
Yeah, we're going to do a slightly different, Jim. So instead of our every 2 weekly episode, we're going to go with an episode once a month, slightly longer edition.
Yeah. With
a better cast and a bigger cast, Jim, I think.
New and improved.
I'm going to get in bother now for saying that, but yeah, new and improved cast. So we're like friends here now. So we.
For another 10 minutes.
I don't know whether Netflix is going to be picking this up, Jim, but we'll do our best.
Joe will do it, right? I think to be fair to everyone, and we're trying to do a bit of video on here as well, so we'll see how that comes out. So we're just going to do intros again. James Freeman's my name, in my 15th year with Grassland Agro. Very proud Tipperary man. Living in South Kilkenny now. Not ideal, but sure, I'm alright down there. I'm okay.
Could be in a worse place.
Easy. John Brennan.
My name is John Brennan. I'm new product manager. Started with the company there last June, so 8 months into the role now. So a proud Roscommon man from a farming background, and really enjoying the role now so far.
Man, John.
Yeah, look, most people that listen to the Sod Pod will know me, or they might know the voice, the stuttering voice that does me on the podcast there the whole time. But my name is
Steady Eddie is definitely false advertising, isn't it?
It is complete utter false advertising. So my name is Edward Healy. Yeah, look, I've been a product manager with Grassland now the last 2 years. Been on the podcast probably the last year and a half, 2 years. Kilkenny man, like Jim here. I don't know if I need to say any more now, Jim.
No, I think that's plenty. I just said enough.
Yeah, I'm gonna. The camera might be broke after this. This is our first time recording a podcast on camera as well.
We might have to say that next month as well if I forgot to hit record.
Yeah, very possible, Jim.
Clodagh.
Yeah, so my name is Clodagh Bolger, proud Kerry woman. Started with Grassland Agro as a product manager last September. Looking forward to getting stuck into the podcast now for the year.
No bother to you. Up the kingdom. No, Peter's the cool dude in the group now.
That's right. Peter Linden is my name. I'm one of the newer recruits with Grassland Agro. Started last summer. I'm working in the north of the country, northeast side of it. Monaghan man myself, and from a dairy background.
That's the shot. Huge wealth of knowledge here, Edward, in fairness to them.
Yeah, it's definitely different, Jim.
Yeah, it's an improvement.
Yeah, it's changed now from the chancers that we had on it in the past there.
See Sean and David Coffey kicking in the door now. Hi. John Loughlin, we've been locked up behind this already. He'll just be passing now in a minute.
That's what will happen now. Ham sandwich in hand.
Big as the devil.
The most perfect timing.
Exactly.
Back out the gap. Look, what we might talk about. So John and Clodagh, you were doing a bit of work for us there recently. Let's have a flavour of that soil sampling and the likes.
Yeah, so look, with the soil sampling, it's a very valuable and important tool for farmers to assess where they're at in terms of soil fertility. So look, there's lots of farmers out there between rules and regulations now. There's very few farmers that don't require soil samples anymore. So it's very important that those samples are taken properly. They're there for 4 years, so it's very important that they're taken properly. So just in terms of who actually needs soil samples now at the moment, so farmers, in order to be compliant with their nitrates, have any farmer that's operating over a stocking rate of 130 kilograms of organic nitrogen per hectare a year needs soil samples to be compliant with their nitrates. Any farmer that's taken part in ACRES, the new environmental scheme, they all need soil samples as well. So it's 1 sample per 5 hectares up to 40 hectares. So if you're a farmer and you have a 40 hectare farm, that's 8 soil samples that you're going to require to be compliant. And then a new rule that came in a couple of years ago, the removal of the P allowance for soils that don't have any soil sample, sparked a lot of interest as well in taking soil samples. And from looking at the Teagasc soil fertility report as well for 2024, you can see since 2022 there's been a massive uptake in taking soil samples in the last few years. So another important date to keep in mind as well, so any soil sample that was taken before the 14th of September in 2021 is no longer valid for 2025.
Yes.
So any soil sample that was taken before that date needs to be resampled.
It's as good as expired now with the time frame gone.
100%, yeah. So just for any of those farmers now that are going out taking soil samples, just a few rules. It may come across as common sense, but just a few things to keep in mind when you're going out taking your soil samples. So the first thing I would say is to be prepared. So make sure that you have a good sturdy soil core, that you're taking soil samples that are going down to your 10 centimetres. That's particularly important for the likes of your phosphorus, because phosphorus is actually immobile in the soil. It only moves, I'd say, about the width of your fingernail. So if you're going along with your soil core and you're only taking up the first 2 or 3 centimetres of the soil, you're getting a very inaccurate reading of the P allowance, or the P that's in the soil. So once you have your soil core, I'd recommend going away and getting your farm mapped as well, so you know exactly where you're taking your soil samples. It's 1 sample per 5 hectare. There's lots of different facilities out there now to map your farm, whether you get onto one of your Grassland Agro reps or your Teagasc advisor, whoever you deal with. And look, once you have that ready to go, make sure you're walking your W when you go into the field, and you're staying away from the likes of your dung patches, your feed tracks, your water tracks, to get an accurate reading of what's actually going on in the field. So I suppose just in terms as well of when is the best time of year to go soil sampling, so look, what we'd be recommending would be to go soil sampling between September and February, before you start going out with the likes of your slurry and your fertiliser and things. And just a few things as well to keep in mind, if you're going out testing, to have a look at your soil pHs. We have to leave a 2-year gap between when lime is applied and when you take that soil sample. And for slurry and fertiliser, you would have to leave about a 3-month gap.
Yeah, I think that's some fairly solid advice now, in fairness, and like for the cost of the soil sample, it actually gives a huge amount of information. You know, like we're in a situation now where we're going more and more towards a kind of a prescription based model in terms of fertilizer. Like, so for the 15 or 20 euro that a soil sample actually costs, it's very, very worthwhile getting it done. And really, every farmer listening to the podcast here today should be actually thinking about renewing those soil samples at the moment. You know, before exactly like what you said, before that organic fertilizer starts to go out in ground.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose as well, Clodagh mentioned there, you know, that soil sample lasts 4 years, so it's important to put in the right time and effort into taking it properly. She also touched on, you know, getting down that 10 centimetres. That's where your primary root hairs are kind of scavenging and getting all the nutrients. So making sure you get down the full 10 centimetres is very important. I suppose, like, if you're not getting down that full 10 centimetres, you could kind of get a more inaccurate result for phosphorus because it's so immobile in the soil. So, you know, you have people going out with quad bikes taking soil samples from a diagonal angle. You know, that's kind of not good practice, really. You know. Yeah,
and when John is saying, I suppose, an inaccurate figure on the phosphorus, it means that you get a slightly higher or elevated phosphorus figure, because the closer you go to the surface, the more phosphorus there is generally. You know, so that's a really good point.
Something that you can touch on, like the cost, like that 15-20 euro, when you divide that over a 4-year period and then divide up your hectares, like on a per hectare basis every year, you're less than €1 or on every acre of ground. So you're getting a huge amount of information to save you, you know, spending, say, excess money on fertiliser that's not needed, or putting the right product in the right place. So it's just something to bear in mind. It's not that, and you know, the fact it lasts for 4 years, when you balance that out every year, it's a very, very small, you know, payment actually that's required to get the right nutrients.
Another important tip as well, I suppose, with the actual soil auger, like, just to make sure it's clean before going out sampling a field, because if you have residue from a previous farm or even rust, that can also impact, you know, the results. Do you know what I mean? So something to bear in mind.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that's where we are in terms of our business at the moment. Like, we're very, very busy outside sampling at the moment. Like, we take the bones of 30,000 soil samples every year. and look, it needs to be done if we want to actually place nutrients on farm in a very accurate manner, like, you know.
And that service you're given, like you just tipped on a couple of points, so soil sampling, we can soil sample, we do soil sample, you know, but then nutrient management plans, you're flat out doing nutrient management plans as well.
Yeah, look, it's extremely busy time there, I know, and all of us at the moment are very, very, very busy, I suppose, reviewing plans at the moment, and actually making sure that they're up to the mark in terms of regulation at the minute. But I suppose, how important is that, Peter?
I suppose it's probably, you touched on the regulation, and that's probably the one that nearly in the last probably 12-18 months that are causing a lot of people concern. And I suppose there's a few other aspects of it in terms of the efficiency of it, you know, from both the financial element we touched on already briefly, but also I suppose from an environmental point of view, that we're not putting out excess nutrients that are potentially either going to be lost for like CRP on overland flow or your nitrate through leaching. I suppose, look at like any other business, your fertiliser and your slurry, they're all input costs in the sense that we want maximum efficiency out of them. And I suppose, like, the fact depending on your cropping system, how many cuts of silage you're doing, what sort of crops you're putting in, they're all varying different levels of requirements. You know, like on you know, if you're taking 4 cuts of silage off a field, or, you know, 100% of them nutrients are going out the gate, whereas if you're grazing that ground, you know, you'll be getting roughly about 60% or 90% of 60% of the P, 90% of the K back onto the ground. Yeah. And that's where I suppose the nutrient management plans tailor that kind of specific advice, because the important thing is, I suppose, is that every farm, they're going to be limited to how much P and K they can buy. There's not like an absolute, you know, a bank there that can just be tapped in. So it's very important that we don't oversupply that in certain areas and jeopardise other areas of the farm that actually need it. You know, for like something I know always incorporate the ATCs when they're out, you know, doing their plans. Reseeding, now is the time to decide what kind of blocks of ground you're going to actually pick out for reseeding, because, you know, if we do our nutrient management plan and do up all the requirements, how much N, how much P the farmer can buy, come June there may not be the allowance there for reseeding. So, you know, and in that case the likes of skipping on phosphorus, you know, it's going to be very, you know, it'll impact the root development where it's actually needed. So really it's just by putting the right nutrients in the right place. And then I suppose from the compliance point of view, you know, everything now is tracked coming into farm gate on the fertiliser register. There's no hiding space from this. And I suppose while the rules have always been there, it's this fertiliser register now that has, I suppose, brought it to a lot of people's attention. You know, and even on that, I suppose there's a lot of different variables that come into how much, I suppose, N and P farmers can buy. It's not no one rule or one set approach fits all. Depends on your stocking rates, your level of concentrates fed. You know, all these different variables, and whether the previous crop that was in the tillage scenario, all that has to be factored in. So it's worth, I suppose, if you're unsure from the farmer's point of view, there's a lot of data, I suppose, in between in calculating your nutrients, but from the farmer's point of view, in terms of giving us, or whoever it may be, Teagasc, to work out your nutrient management plan, you know, if you know your concentrate fed, your area, your stock figures, after that a quick discussion will you know, on what fields of, you know, what cropping system they're in, or the tillage of the grass, is it silage, etc. We can sort a lot of that out. You know,
I suppose like a way to think about nutrient management plans and how important they are at the moment. Like, you know, if you're a livestock farmer, a nutrient management program is the equivalent of putting a diet together for your dairy cow. It's the exact same thing, and it's as important, if not more important, because we're looking to grow a crop, whether that's a crop of barley or a crop of grass. It's the same thing. You know, they both have specific requirements. If you treat it the way it should be treated, you're going to have a better crop on the end of it. Whether if it's a grass plant, you're going to have a more leafy, more digestible crop after it, or if it's a crop of barley, you're going to have, you know, more full grains. You're going to have more head counts. You're going to have a better crop establishment. One way or the other, if you don't give it exactly what it needs, it's going to be a slightly poorer crop. Like, and just to give you some idea, I know myself, and I'm sure all of you see out on the road as well. Over the last year, there has been an awful amount of confusion out there as to what farmers are actually allowed. You know, derogation farmers are one story, because irrigation farmers all have nutrient management programs as part of their irrigation. But any farmer that's stocked below that 170 is kind of in limbo land in terms of what are they allowed, what are they not allowed, and a lot of them actually don't know what they actually are allowed to buy. I suppose I was just an example there. I was at a beef discussion group or a beef farm walk with Teagasc. I was asked along with one of my colleagues, Sophie Tyner, there to come along and give a little bit of the talk on nutrient management planning and soil health. And there's some brilliant beef farmers up there in Wicklow. Now they were from all over the country, but there was some great beef farmers at that walk. I asked the question, just looking for a show of hands as to how many actually knew what they were allowed to buy in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus. And I would say about a fifth of the farmers that were there actually were able to raise their hands confidently and say, I know how much P I'm allowed to buy, I know how much N I'm allowed to buy. And when I did ask the question, a lot of them probably said because they didn't understand exactly how much they were allowed to buy, they were probably underdoing it just to be a little bit more conscious.
For safety.
So look, what I would say to anybody out there, there's massive importance and there's a massive amount to gain by actually getting a nutrient management program done, made up. So please get onto your local Grassland Agro advisor, because it's something that we can actually help with, or your local Teagasc office, and actually ask the question, what am I allowed to buy? You're going to have to provide a bit of information in terms of the your soil sample results, your land areas, the amount of meal that's being bought, but it can be it takes a bit of time, but it can be relatively easily put together, and then at least you will have a shopping list come the end of the year. If you buy this amount, you won't go over your allowance. But also the most important thing is that the crop that you're feeding, whether that's grass or a tillage crop, is going to get the nutrition that it actually requires. And that's so important going forward, and I think it's the way the industry is going. It's going towards a prescription-based service, Jim.
Yeah. But even take this, right, let's go backwards to go forward. So Claude had a big talk there around site sampling, how to maximise that, how to do it right. And Peter and Ed then are after talking about nutrient management plans. Yeah. We're a fertiliser company. We're not embarrassed about that at all. We're out heavily trying to advise the right stuff in the right place at the right time. But John Brennan, you're going to talk about slurry management, which we're huge advocates of.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose slurry application is all about recycling nutrients on farm, and I suppose it's very good farm practice, to make the most amount of your organic slurries and your farm yard manures that you generate on farm, and I suppose optimising that nutrient cycle. So I suppose a big rule that has come out this year now in 2025 is any farm stocked at 100 kilograms of organic nitrogen per hectare and over that has to apply either slurry with low emission slurry spreading application machinery. So I suppose that will be a challenge for a lot of farmers, because the fact that it's dropped from 130 down to 100, that ties in another 15,000 farms across the country. So that's, I suppose, farms that are kind of decently stocked will fall underneath that umbrella. So it's something to bear in mind. Research has shown that the less technology is retain a lot more nitrogen compared to splash bait technology. In the form of ammonia, I think is 30 to 60% more efficient using less technology than your conventional splash bait. So that's going to be very good environmentally, but also economically on farm.
Yes, for sure. I know, and that all that's a very, very valuable source of nutrients going out on farm, and really that organic fertilizer, if we think about it, we're the beginning of February now, the zones are all open now at this stage. Am I right in saying that? Yeah. So really, farmers, especially livestock farms, should be looking at targeting that slurry back out onto that silage ground. Yeah, really, 100%. Where the big crops are coming off. It's so important that slurry goes back onto the fields that the big crops are coming off, and that's really, I suppose, part of it. Ties in with Clodagh's point on soil sampling. If you don't soil sample, you don't know the best places to put these nutrients. So I suppose we need to start with the soil sampling, we need to get the nutrient management plan right, and then we need to apply the slurry in the farm in the less farm on those areas that need it the most, John.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely ties into what Clodagh was saying on the soil sampling, and also what you were talking about with the nutrient management plan, and targeting those fields with the high phosphorus and potassium offtakes. I suppose like with I'm not going to say expensive anything, but another good practice is testing your slurry as well on farm. There's an awful lot of variability from farm to farm in terms of the phosphorus and potassium concentrations of slurries, so it's something to bear in mind as well.
Yeah, well, I think you were touching on a really important point there. Like there is a huge cost to growing crops in this country. And we need to grow these crops to feed the population, to feed our livestock, to produce milk, to produce beef, to produce lamb, whatever it is. Like there is a cost associated with all 100%. That. But I suppose we have to be a little bit more targeted about where we spend that money going forward, and that's really going back into that kind of prescription based service. But I think really the main point is like know what you're allowed, know what nutrients you have on the farm in terms of your slurries. So get your slurry tested. Whether that's using a hydrometer or sending it to the lab. So valuable, and it'll allow every farmer that's listening to this podcast to actually use the nutrients that they have or allowed in the most efficient way.
Yeah, massively. Like the research has shown that the splash plate loses typically 54% of your nitrogen compared to your trail and shoe, like with 35%. That's still a substantial amount of nitrogen you're losing, but it's a lot better than 54%. And I suppose as we talk about water quality and all these issues today, moving to your trail and shoe or your dribble bar is going to improve, your efficiency on farm of your organic fertilizers.
Definitely. So we've discussed a little bit about your organic fertilizers. What about our chemical fertilizers? Because we're up on the spreading dates there as well.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. So I suppose from the 15th of February, Zone C will also be allowed to spread your chemical fertilizer. So. I suppose a general rule of thumb is just because you're allowed to spread it doesn't mean you have to. To make sure the conditions are right. You don't spread fertilizer when there's flooding or snow even or storms as we had there in January. So I suppose getting the timing right, the application right, and the right product. They're the key steps.
And that's even what you're saying there. Just because it's open, you don't have to spread it. And go back to the point with slurry and our whole nutrient management plans. That's something I see now when we're going through plans with farmers. In the past, it often nearly out of habit. It's good practice to get the slurry out on the grazing ground early. But when we're looking at nutrient management plans, come August, there could be a deficit, say, on the likes of silage ground, where maybe there's not enough of a P allowance on that farm. Whereas when we go back and look at, say, the grazing ground, they have enough of P and K there. And just by holding back, say, on a couple on getting, if you have the room, of course, come springtime, to hold back and putting out some of the slurry and keeping some to balance your indexes August time. It can just make the difference in terms of when we quantify the offtakes of, say, the silage cutting. They may not have the chemical allowance, but having that extra 2,000 gallons per acre can just, if you like, cover the P and the K indexes. That ultimately we're not running the soil into the ground. That a bit like what you said, Ed, to produce the milk or to produce the live weight gain, there's a cost associated that in terms of pulling nutrients out of the ground. And just by looking at the nutrient management plan early on, the likes of now in January, before a lot of farms start calving, it's just being aware that I may not have the chemical to replace the requirements, and there might be more benefit in holding that slurry on. In this, that seems to be something that's popping up, I would see.
So it's another really good point, because if we think about it in a dairy scenario, when we're grazing animals, on our grazing ground we typically recycle an awful amount of nutrients, through urine and through dung. Whereas on our silage ground, we're coming in, we're whipping everything off. Absolutely everything, which is very, very high. We think about it, right? To grow that crop of silage, we're talking about 25 kilos a K, and 3 to 4 kilos a P. So in that 7-ton crop, we're probably looking at, and a lot of people wouldn't think of this, right? But we're probably talking about, in that 7-ton crop, we're removing about 140 units a K, right? Roughly. And about 20 units a P. So that needs to be replaced.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to be, and we can see it. We generally the way you see it, I'm sure all of you have seen it on the maps, right? Go out and soil sample the farm. Like this is not this is typical on farms in the country. Go out and soil sample a farm. We can nearly tell which are silage fields and which aren't. Just by looking at the results. Yeah. And generally what you'd see is any field that's around the farmyard is radioactive. They're glowing. They're absolutely glowing when you get a colour-coded map. And the further you go away from that farmyard, the less and less it gets. And that's typically it. The drier ground, or the ground that's closest to the yard, gets the most slurry. But we probably need to look at replacing those off-takes that we're taking away, and we will grow better crops on the back of it. We have massive capacity to do it, Jim.
Yeah, sometimes we're just so busy. It's like, I need to empty that tank, I didn't realise and all. So I was talking to a lovely dairy farmer the weekend there, Joey Ryan. I was saying, what are you doing? We're having this debate. Joey was just talking about when he took over the farm from Dad, the way, it's like, there's a lot of jobs that are done, and it's like, oh Jesus, I'm doing that now, you know, and how he tried to evolve it a bit, you know. And he decided then, he went and he spoke to his seed company, he went and he spoke to his choice advisor, his milk advisor, right? And he spoke to ourselves, of course, and he took all the components together. So he kind of, inside in his own outfit, it's like, he site samples every 3 years. The reason he brought it to 3, some would say, oh, that's great, and others would say it's overkill. Someone else site sample every year. The reason he does 3 years is his reseeding plan is every 6 years. That he's done 6 to the farm, roughly. There's a few fields that are okay, but you know. So that's why, by splitting the numbers, but the numbers always stay the same, with the 6-year reseed plan and soil sampling every 3 years. And that was kind of his model. But slurry management was unbelievable. He's actually said what you just said in reverse. You said it, and it turned the grass inside out. Turned the grass. Now he did reckon that grass seed doesn't last as good today as it did back in the old days, right? You know? So we don't think it's all grass seed companies.
That's a debate. No, we're not going to get into
that. But it was just really interesting, and the way he's managed his fertiliser bill now on the back of that. And the place is fabulous, you know.
Yeah, that's it's absolutely huge, like, you know. So.
But speak to experts.
Yes.
Get their knowledge and tailor it to your own structure and your own farm in line with the regulations. And it's just a simplified plan then, and it runs like clockwork now.
I think that, Jim, that's the ideal word to use. Simplicity, really. Yeah. You know, just because you're getting the nutrient management plan done up, or you're getting soil samples done up, doesn't mean you have to change absolutely everything on your farm. No. What the whole thing with it is keeping things simple, targeting the things that you can actually target and affect, and making small improvements. And as we make small improvements, we're going to grow better crops, we're going to improve our water quality, we're going to do a whole range of things. Small changes can make a big difference.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Definitely. I suppose going back to the less technology again with the slurry application, you know, a lot of farmers out there won't have that equipment on their farms, you know, that will be a challenge. So I think there are grants available with the TANs, so it's worth looking into that if you're listening at home and you're involved with that, and also getting, I suppose, advice from your advisor in Clodagh about how to, I suppose, navigate if you don't have that technology to apply the slurry. You know, you might have to get into contact with contractors and all that, so a key thing would probably be contacting the contractors early, so, you know, your name is on the list, you know, that's fair to say.
100%.
And even now, when you just, I suppose, talk about simplicity of the plan, I'm just conscious we talk through an awful lot of stuff there, and the last thing we want to do is frighten farmers that this is actually a very complicated process to follow. But, you know, in the likes of our plans, there's generally 3 or 4 different, if you like, fertiliser tailored applications. Might mean, you know, your grazing ground could be just broken into 2 sections. One might be, you know, maintenance. Yeah. It's good for your P's and K's. The other might be, you know, build P or K. You know, you're not going in and out every field adjusting the fertiliser spreader between applications. It's a very simple program to follow. It's colour coded. Red, it's lacking. Amber, it needs a bit of work. Green, you're safe. It's a maintenance requirement. Do you know, so don't let that just put any farmer off in terms of having to go and look for this advice. It's a very simple program to actually follow. You know, the computer will look after all the calculations, and between the advice of our ATCs, they will, you know, they'll make sure all the necessary regulations along the way are checked, and ultimately the end product is a very simple plan to follow. So just not to frighten anyone off the complexity of it, you know.
I suppose probably the most important thing of all, Peter, or that you just touched on as part of that nutrient management program. Like, Clodagh, how important is it once we do those soil samples that we act on the lime advice?
Yeah, you literally just took the words out of my mouth.
My
I
bad.
was going to say.
I need to stop talking now.
Like, we talked a lot there about slurry and the importance of chemical fertiliser and things, but the first thing myself when I look at a fertiliser plan is the lime requirement, because to get the best bang for your buck out of your fertiliser, you need to have your lime requirement, your pH at optimum. So for an optimum pH for grassland, you're talking about 6.3 to 6.5. So, like, to get the best bang for your buck out of your fertiliser, you need to correct that first. And like, look, even in terms of your phosphorus as well, if you're like, that's very susceptible to lock up at different pHs. So if you like, you don't have to go too far down the pH scale for phosphorus to be locked up. If your soils are at a pH of 6, which, look, some farmers might think that's a grand pH, but like, your phosphorus is only 50% available at a pH of 6. And even if you go higher up the pH scale, if you go up to a pH of 7, calcium begins to lock up phosphorus as well. So look, it's very important that that's fixed first before you start thinking about what products you're going to apply to yourself.
And that's to get the best bang out of the products then that go on, because once you get to that 6.3 to 6.5, the grass can maximise everything that's taken over there, so the pH does, you know.
100%.
And lime is good value. We don't sell it. Lime is great value, you know.
It's the cheapest fertiliser you'll ever buy. Cheapest fertiliser you'll ever buy. But look, actually, I suppose if we are trying to get out on lime, we might still have opportunities. We just need to be a little bit careful about our fertiliser selection. I suppose that's kind of an important thing. So, like, typically if you're applying lime, you will maybe try and stay off that field with slurry or straight urea in that 3-month period directly after it. You will be more susceptible to getting higher losses of that in. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, look, I know myself, there has been a lot, because of the back end that we had a super back end.
Yes,
in fairness, that was a great back end for farmers to actually get through work. There was a lot of lime spread in the back end of last year, which is going to be very, very positive for soil indexes and fertiliser efficiency going forward, you know. So that's positive, and it has been seen, and hopefully John might talk us through a little bit of the Clodagh soil fertility data it is being seen in the results, Jim. We are seeing phosphorus levels on different enterprises improving slightly.
First round fertiliser, Edward.
Yes, so
early P, early N, wait and see. Where are you going, Ed?
We're getting to that point now, Jim. So like we're early February now at this stage. Look, we get tail end of January. We're after getting a few dirty storms a few dirty storms. We were without power now for a long time. Poor old John Brennan here hasn't had a shower in a week. So we had a tough time at the end of January there. So we're getting to that point now where we need to actually start thinking about what fertiliser we're going to put out for the first round. And like, if you think about it, like, our first round of grazing is quite simple. We go out and we just mow everything that's in front of us. We let cows clean everything that's in front of us. The big danger point, or the big point that we actually get under pressure for grass, is trying to have enough grass back on those first grazed paddocks, to start the second round. So, like, early nitrogen is really, really important on farms, and it's something we've kind of gone away from the last few years because of the bad growing seasons and because of the cost of fertiliser. But where you're going to get a really, really good return from early nitrogen is coming into your second round. So what we're trying to do here is, if we were able to get out our half bag urea or 3/4 bag urea at some point in February, either before the first round or maybe halfway through the first round, we're going to give that crop a little bit more energy for regrowth after it's cleaned off with that first round. And that's what we really needed to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to wake the plant up from its dormancy over the winter and I suppose start producing that really leafy material.
Yes.
So we can get enough grass back on those first growth
Perfect
plants.
time, and John O'Loughlin has entered the building. He's in the hot seat. He demanded a grand arrival.
He's in terrible humour after Clare was beaten there at the end of January.
See that, in their own backyard.
All the raving he did for the whole year about Clare back, they're gone again, boys. And then
What's wrong with the Legion?
Not fun in January, Johnny.
I won't be too worried about it.
John, how are you keeping?
Good, Jim, yeah. Great to be back. It's great to have the team all year.
Back for another crack in the win.
Yeah, wasn't out.
Teagasc side fertility data.
Yeah, bit of a
John has
story.
this studied inside out.
Yeah.
What's the story, Johnny?
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. So I suppose the trends in the purchase of phosphorus and potassium fertilizer have been down for the last couple of years. So significant reduction in the amount of P&K that's been applied. I suppose overall the stats reflect that in that they're slightly down, but there is actually a moderate increase in a dairy system. So I suppose what you're seeing there maybe is that dairy farmers are maybe still able to spend the money on the P&K.
Okay.
They're investing in it, and maybe other enterprises have simmered back a little bit. The tillage stats, the tillage are farmers are really in tune with their site fertility, but still only 1 in 5 fields is optimal for pH, P&K. So that means the other 80 is suboptimal for either pH, phosphorus or potassium, which is, a real challenge. Like it's so important, and it's more magnified in the tillage crop. In dairy, we've suffered from it. We're still very poor. So a moderate increase, we're slight reductions in the area suboptimal for P&K, but still 75% of dairy farms are suboptimal for either P or K.
Okay.
So it's a big penalty in yield production, and we've seen that, I suppose, Jim, in the challenges we've had trying to grow grass in the last couple of seasons.
Yes, yeah.
No, it's been very, very tricky. You'd all agree, lads, I suppose. You'd agree.
It would. And I suppose probably in some farms maybe I'm going to say there's a little more hate in place further, in the sense that they can get away with, I know it might not always be the best practice in terms of a cost point of view, putting in extra silage or making it into the diet, whereas the tillage farmer, if they don't supply the nutrients, they have a direct hit on their yield. Whereas on the dairy side, you're balancing production, I suppose. You have an intermediate in between.
The challenge is we've reduced our chemical fertiliser nitrogen rates, but we're bringing in nitrogen from other forms, either grass silage, imported feeds. The meal feeding has been up significantly. A lot of people, the average is probably 1.5 tonne, 1.6 tonne for last year with tricky weather events, but we're still bringing in nitrogen or protein. It's just that we've displaced the chemical fertiliser, and realistically you'd have to weigh that up. It's not really good for profitability, and from an environmental point of view or water quality point of view, what's very important is getting the nitrogen from the factory here where we're sitting, Jim, into the grass plant. And all the measures that farmers are taking around, being accurate with their making sure the soil temperature is 6 degrees and rising, not wasting it, the accurate spreading and application of the fertiliser, addressing soil pH and soil fertility. All these things are really, really important, and I suppose there's a huge focus on cost coming from a really strong year by a more challenging year, and I think the data is going to show that last year was actually a really, really good year, even though despite it was a very difficult start. So I suppose investing in soil fertility while keeping your costs, reasonable is very, very important, and deciding what you're comfortable with and spend on soil fertility in cents per litre. And I just urge everyone not to be going off, saying I need to spend X number of cents per litre because that's what someone else is doing. It's down to where you are. So, and if you have to build your soil fertility, it's going to cost you more, but it's the best return on investment you can make on farm. It's the only return on investment you get an ROI in the first year. Even reseeding it takes 1.5 years. Genetics is a slow burn. Machinery is probably, much and all as we love it, is probably a bad investment. But if that's the one thing I would say to anyone, K is very easy to do, lime is very easy to do, P is trickier, but it can be done. So
for sure. But I suppose on that, John, it's about looking at the small things we can change in order to hopefully in the long term give us a big return, and I suppose we need to as part of that act on everything that we've talked about here today. So our soil sampling, put together a nutrient management program, you know, and then factor in the cost of our full fertilizer for the year and try to build towards something over a 3-year period, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not overnight. You don't just say, oh, I'm going to invest in soil fertility this year and then forget about it.
Yep.
It does take time, but listen, it's absolutely key. There's a lot of talk about, you know, resilience in our systems and stuff like that. It has been the theme. Cost and resilient systems and dairy production has been the theme for nearly all the conferences, which are thankfully coming to an end.
Conference now.
I'm burnt out now from seeing the same lads in the trade at every single one of them, and having the same small talk. But no, it's they're very, very important for me. I think like it all comes back to getting the soil right, making the most out of the nitrogen that you apply. That's a no-brainer. It's a really simple thing that can be done. It's not very exciting, you know, but it is so simple, and it's the same stuff. They've been talking about this stuff for 40, 50 years, like, you know, but it's just going back to basics and getting stuck in, doing all the work as all the lads we've outlined earlier as well.
I'd say we're close to wrapping up. Anyone, any final thoughts?
Oh, look, I think we're after talking about a lot in this podcast now, to be fair, Jim.
And you went well, Ed.
I think
it was one of your better ones now.
Not too much stuttering now, in fairness now. I've been known to do that. So, look, I think the whole thing is we're after discussing a lot of things here. If anybody has any questions, you know, get onto their local Grassland Agro advisor, get onto their local geologist office. We need to make sure that everyone is soil sampling. We can facilitate nutrient management plans quite easily once we get a little bit of information, you know. And I think if we want to make some good steps forward, I think we need to do this. So please reach out if anybody is unsure about what they're actually allowed over the course of the year, because that soil fertility is going to be so important going forward if we want to keep growing crops at the rate we're growing. Anyone else?
I suppose just to remember that date as well with the soil samples, the 14th of September 2021. Them soil samples are no longer valid for 2025. So
very, very good point. Yeah.
I suppose we talk about soil fertility there as well. Like overall soil management is key, you know, and we look at that in our soil sustainability program in the Salvita and doing the digs and looking for compaction. You know, you can have all the soil fertility you want, but you need good soil structure, I suppose, to take advantage of that in the ground, you know, and that's something to be aware of too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Spread out the nitrogen, Jim, and just best of luck to everyone for calving as well. It'll be sick of it there now.
Mind yourselves out there. Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.